evening all. I hope you all can see the slides and hear me loud and clear.
Good evening.
Ravi?
Yes, we can hear you, and slides also we can see from the screen.
Yeah,
It's good.
okay.
So we will start at 7:34. So I will
Okay.
welcome Mr. Priyanka Karunaratne, the speaker today for the CPD event number 3 part 2, because of this COVID situation we have decided to conduct CPDs 1.5 hour per each, 1 hour to 1.5 hour each. So today is the second part of the CPD of certification and payments in construction contracts. Mr. Priyanka Karunaratne was a former SLQS History and Committee president, and also he was very dedicated for our SLQS works also. And once I invited for the first CPD session of the 2020, and also last year in 2019 also he delivered the first CPD in the year. So this time he did the first CPD as well. Now this is the third CPD. And also when I propose we will go ahead with some day-to-day subjects which is important for our quantity surveys, majority of the quantity surveys, then we have decided to go ahead with this topic. Actually it is very valuable, and last week's session was very valuable. Today he is going to add more value to that with his experiences. He is the senior contract specialist in civil service employees pension fund, and also a lot of experience in Oman. So hopefully we can expect a lot of practical experiences today. And also there are few messages to the membership. Now we understand now the COVID situation is quite serious here. So therefore, together with the Sri Lankan Embassy and the Sri Lankan Community Social Club, they have formed a helping team to the people who infected or who got contact with the infected people. So there is a telephone number to support to Sri Lankan. Anyone, if we have any problem, any doubts, or if you think you have infected or your friends have infected, so you can call. There are a board of Sri Lankan doctors to help to the Sri Lankan community. The telephone number we have displayed, I will tell you again: 79104838. You can note down this. 79104838 is the telephone number. If you have any problem about the COVID, or if your friends, or if anyone known to you have being in touch with anybody of COVID infected, you can call to them and get help and advices. And also, as we promised, we will be continuing the CPD sessions. We will be publishing the next CPD details through email and Facebook. Apart from that, I invite all of you to actually participate with the SLQS discussion forum. SLQS discussion forum, you can go to SLQS website, SLQS Oman website. Then there's under the events there will be a first tab is the SLQS discussion forum. You can use that if you have any questions. If you can add any discussion topics, you can add to that. We have a experienced and educated panel with us to help to resolve your problems. It's like we expect your team, your members, all of members to actually participate with this, with the day-to-day technical problems or QS academic problems, anyone. So I invite Mr. Priyanka Karunaratne to start. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you all for coming today. I hope that you all are staying safe at home. And I must first of all thank the Sri Lankan Contact Service Fraternity in inviting me to this session. And even though we are apart, even though we are not seeing face to face, we should we should always brush up our knowledge. And while teaching also, I'm learning. And I know that there are a lot of experienced quantity surveyors also who has joined here, and all are welcome. And let us try to have some quality time for the next 1.5 to or maximum 2 hours. Today is the day 2 of the certification and payments in construction contracts. As I have told you during the first session, what we have done is we have gone through some knowledge areas. We have touched some knowledge areas pertaining to the certification and payments in the construction contracts. So today my aim is to embed you some of the notions which has been in practice related to the certification and payments in construction contracts through some case studies. Because as you are aware, unless your knowledge is being practiced, a book is just a piece of paper. So we have to understand certain scenarios which has been in practice, and I'm sure that from the new quantity surveyor up to the most experienced quantity surveyor, brushing up the general things while being mindful about the changes is of paramount importance in order for us to go ahead with this particular profession. So today's day 2 is consisting of 4 case studies, and I will be talking about certain certificates and notices and some conditions of contracts, especially since you are familiar with FIDIC 1981, which has been formed in FIDIC 1977. Probably you might not have seen FIDIC 1977, very old sort of a version. From that point onwards, during those 4 decades, how these have changed and how different scenarios have been applied, we are going to discuss, and few legislation which has been applicable to this these case studies, and payment mechanism associated with that will be discussed. Right. The first case study is actually related to, let me just put it here. Right. Okay. It's easier for me to share the screen somewhere here. Right. Okay. Now, this is a very common scenario that we encounter in our lives. We will study this thoroughly and completely. So from the very beginning up to the most stringent type of a scenario that we are going to do. So the first case study which I have selected is the contract BOQ. You all know what a contract BOQ is. That is the BOQ which is contained within the bundle of documents which has been signed by the parties to the contract. Has a value of 100,000 Riyals Omani for the supply and installation of a chiller plant. What you can see on your right hand side is a chiller plant. The contractor produces an invoice of 140,000. As you can see at a glance, that the invoice which has been produced by the contractor is exceeding the BOQ rate. Right, that is the first thing that you might have observed in looking at this scenario. Then you will have a confusion upon receipt of the chiller plant to the site, and I have colored in red the word site. And then along with the invoice, the contractor produces a shipping charge invoice of Riyals Omani 10,000. So how much do you pay to the contractor as materials on site, materials off site, right? So this is the sort of a case study that we are going to study today. So I will be giving you a lot of practical experience related to that one. Even though this is just one case study, you can apply this in different scenarios, right? Now, to start with, there is a principle. Actually, this was always in practice with our quantity surveys, what we call as the flip side scenario. Let me just explain that one. A flip side scenario, or the vice versa scenario, gives you an indication about what will happen if it is going in the other side. You get my point. I hope that you will get my point, right? So if the invoice which has been produced by the contractor is substantially lower than what has been anticipated, you still apply the same scenario. So this is what we call as the flip side scenario, which we are going to discuss throughout this one. So you may be having different options. Should we pay 80% of the invoice, which is 112,000, but bear in mind that you are paying 12,000 more than what is stipulated within the BOQ rate, right? Option 2, should we pay 100,000 as the amount allocated in the BOQ is that, right? So you can see that for the chiller plant supply and installation of the chiller plant, the whole allocation is 100,000. So why can't we limit that to 100,000? Then the third option, should we pay 122,000 including the shipping charges, right? And then what that the option 3 exactly means is, for that 112,000 you have added the shipping charge invoice. That is how 122,000 comes into play, right? And then the option 4, should we pay 120,000? Whether we pay 80% of the invoice value to the related to the material, and then you're going to add 80% of the material, the invoice value related to the shipping charge. Now, when analyzing this particular scenario, first and foremost, there are certain questions which comes into your mind. One is, what is site? Number 2, what if on site? If something is on site, what will happen? What is off site? Then what is invoice and what is cost? So these things that we have to discuss when we go through. The dictionary meaning of an invoice is a list of goods sent or services provided with a statement of the sum due for this a bill, right? So this is how the word invoice has been produced. Whenever you go and purchase something, there is an invoice which gives you a credible account of what you are paying to that particular person, right? So let us analyze this scenario. First and foremost, my down arrow key is not working for some reason. I don't know why. Right, anyway. Right. Now it's working. Right. Now, I hope you remember last time also I mentioned about this word site, but unfortunately I could not play the video which was there. But today I'm going to explain this to you. Now, in FIDIC 1977 version, the word site has been defined as the land and other places on, under, in, or through which the permanent works or temporary works designed by the engineer are to be executed. So I'll be stopping there, and then I'm going to give you an insight about how this has evolved. Because again, going back to this one, I'm going to talk about something very, very important. Material is on site or material is off site. We have to really understand the horizontal and vertical boundaries of what the site is. Right now, Oman conditions of contract, yes, erroneously it has been put as 1987. I will just change into 1981 because Oman conditions of contract has been issued in 1981, right? And then do some changes here, right? 1981. Now, as you can see here, there is not much change within FIDIC 1977 and Oman conditions of contract related to the site, right? Now, I would like to just explain you some prepositions which has been used in this word site, right? It says in, right? Now you can see this particular rat is going into that particular box, so we call it in, right? Now, if this particular if someone is on that particular wedge of a land, you can call it on, right? And then it say through, right? You can see this particular serpent is going through that particular tunnel, so it is through, right? And then what is the other one that we are going to talk about is under, right? As you can see, if there is any sort of a foundation work which is going on under the sun, you can see that this one, particular one, it says under the wall, right? Now, you can understand, apart from these particular prepositions, there are certain other prepositions which will define the boundaries of a site. One typical example is that if you are going to construct an airport site, you know, in an airport project, there are a lot of activities, a lot of testing and commissioning, which is being undertaken on above that particular site. Therefore, that word over is not there within this particular definition. We call this sort of a list as a non-exhaustive list of prepositions. So bearing in mind, when you are giving a non-exhaustive list of prepositions, it is difficult for you to determine something which is not there. Because as you know, now the first legal principle comes into play. I'm sure that most of all you are knowing about that, the contra preferentum principle, right? Contra preferentum principle says if there is any sort of again ambiguity which may arise because of the sense, because of the way that is the contract has been drafted, it will be judged. It will be judged not in favor of the drafter, because the drafter had the privilege to do that one, right? Okay, the drafter had the privilege which the receiver did not have, right? So if there is any discrepancy or any sort of anomaly within that one, within the drafter's document, it should be against the drafter. Oman Civil Code also applies the same thing. So now these are the application factors that we are going to use, right? This is going beyond the knowledge. Now let us understand what happened in FIDIC 1987. FIDIC 1987 totally eliminated this non-exhaustive list of preposition in order to accommodate the other areas, other prepositions as well. Now it says a very simplistic way, means the places provided by the employer where the works are to be executed and any other places specified in the contract as forming part of the site. Now let us understand that you bring a very expensive scaffolding set to the site. Now under FIDIC 1987, which was considered as one of the most robust type of a document, as per this one, you all know the works which starts from capital W contains permanent works as well as temporary works. So if one argues that I needed to be paid for the materials on site related to that particular scaffolding, nobody can challenge that one. FIDIC identified this 12 years later. Now you can see in FIDIC 1999 version, it says the site means the places where the permanent works are to be executed to and which the plant and material are to be delivered. Now you can see I have colored this in red because of the evolution of the terms pertaining to the FIDIC, right? Now it has identified certain problems associated with this one. I will give you a very simple example. Right now, I'm sure that you are aware of this Baraljisa Resort and Spa, right? Baraljisa Resort and Spa. I know if some people may have been also here who have worked in that particular project. During the enabling works period of that particular site, there was no access to the site through the road. Okay, that the construction materials needed to be transported via ferry or maybe airlifted, all these things. Now suppose that you are constructing a berth, right, where these ferries are needed to be done. So that particular berth is totally away from the actual site, the technical meaning of the site. So if you are talking about the works are to be executed in the part of the site, right, works are to be executed, that is a temporary work. So a temporary work which is totally away from the site cannot be considered as site, because there are a lot of insurance problems, there are a lot of accessibility problems, security problems which you may encounter. Therefore FIDIC 99 onwards, they decided to say means the places where the permanent works are to be executed and to which plant and materials are to be delivered. Now this is the first time within the definition of the site the word plant has been incorporated, right? Now if you see the FIDIC 1987 and previous versions, especially in Oman conditions of contract, we call constructional plant. Constructional plant is the contractor's equipment which is being used in the newer versions of FIDIC. You all know about that, right? So in order to avoid that ambiguity, right, FIDIC decided to change the word plant to contractor's equipment. Because we all, when we are talking in our day-to-day life, we are talking about plant, right? We all know that it is not the actual plant that we are talking about. And we will go to the exact meaning of the word plant. And you can see the word plant has been capitalized here. So what does that mean? There is a defined term called plant within FIDIC 99 version onwards, right? And then the word materials also has been capitalized, right? That means FIDIC 99 version onwards, the materials also has become a defined term. And then always we are looking into the things. Now I'll just give you a very simple example in what is still containing within FIDIC 2017. It says an year is 365 days. It is wrong. An year is 365 days, and you can say if it is a leap year, it has to be 366 days, right? Otherwise, when you are calculating a construction period based on days, right? When there is a leap year, that the way that you are calculating with the definition will go out. Okay, so like that, FIDIC 99 had this particular term as may be specified in the contract. What do you mean by as may be? That is discretional, isn't it? Right? At the time of signing the contract, you cannot have a defined term which is discretional. Otherwise, it will create an ambiguity. Otherwise, it will create room for claims. So FIDIC identified that one. Then now you can see in FIDIC 2017 version, this word as maybe is not there. So now we have a very crisp, without jargon, a very proper definition which says site means the places where the permanent works are to be executed and to which plant and material are to be delivered, and any other places specified in the contract as forming part of the site. Now I'll tell you why. There may be a prefabrication yard which will produce most of the prefabricated items required for the site. So it will have a substantial amount of resources contained within that particular area. So there is no harm in defining that particular area as part of the site. So that discretion has been given in FIDIC 2017, right? Now let us understand how this material on site. Okay, before going into that one, I have to say, even though in technical terminology we call this as material on site. Now, if you ask from anyone, you call it material on site. FIDIC 99 onwards, it's not material on site. It is plant and material on site. Plant and material off site. Okay, Ravi, I hope that everybody is hearing properly, right?
Yes, Priyanka.
No problem, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right, very good, right. Now, I don't know whether you can see this one. If you want, I can enlarge this. This is the very old version of FIDIC 1977 version. In the second term, it says, where advances are to be made by the employer to the contractor in respect of constructional plant and materials, the conditions of payment and repayment shall be as set out in part 2 of clause number 60. So that means FIDIC 1977 version did not identify material on site with a specific percentage to be paid. If you go to the FIDIC 1977 version, which was a very old version, it did not identify. Now let us come back to the comfort zone of us. What is Oman conditions of contract say about this material on site? You can see it is very clearly stated under item 12 of appendix to the form of tender. Under clause 60.4b, it says payment of material on site, payment of material at site actually, 80% of net value delivered to site. Okay. Then if you go to 60.4, now this is the thing which I wanted to explain. If you go to 60.4b, it says Within 28 days of delivery of the engineer, in accordance with clause 3 of this clause, the contractor's monthly statement, the engineer shall issue an interim certificate to the employer with a copy to the contractor certifying such amounts, if any, as the engineer may consider proper. Now, you might be confused. Suppose you are a very new company surveyor, right? You first see the appendix to the form of tender and you go to that particular 60.4. It does not mention anything about material on site. Actually, the material on site has been defined in monthly statements, right? In the monthly statement, it is item number 3, which is going above. Now, if you can see this particular element within the appendix to the form of tender, you directly jump into 60.4b. PDIC has eliminated that. PDIC 1987 version has corrected that one. You will be a little bit confused because then you have to go back to subclause 3. So the core of the material on site payment mechanism has been stipulated within clause 60.3 monthly statements. Let us read it carefully. The contractor shall submit to the engineer after the end of each month a statement in the form approved by the engineer showing B. A list of any goods or materials delivered to site, but not yet incorporated in the permanent works and their value. Such goods or materials being protected against all kinds of damage, including deterioration to the approval of the engineer. Now, it gives some sort of a sense, right, that the site needs to be, the materials needs to be delivered to what we call as the site, right, but not yet incorporated in the permanent works and their value. Now, even when you go to the definition of the site, it says works are to be done, right? Now here, the material on site payment in the Oman conditions of contract, it mentions about permanent works, which the materials are meant to be for the permanent works. So this will eliminate that ambiguity which I have told you. Then going back to 60.4, it says such amounts, if any, as the engineer may consider proper, but in no case engineer may consider proper. Proper is a term that we normally use for, it is a term which is saying that it is in accordance with the acceptance of the engineer. These days that we are using acceptable, appropriate, the other alternative words are there for the word proper, right? But in no case exceeding 80% of their value in accordance with the contract, right? Now you will be having a question. Then in that case, in our particular example, okay, is there any restriction for us to pay 80% of the value of the invoice, right? Because this does not say within anywhere of the conditions of contract that you cannot pay this one. Now let us go back to the flip side theory. Suppose the material is substantially low. Let us just go back to that particular example. See, this particular chiller plant, the contractor, let's say the contractor gives us a bona fide invoice which reflects 140,000 riyals. That means he has already incurred this particular cost, isn't it? Right? So that means he has to pay. He has paid this to that particular. Maybe there may this is subjected to LC, right? Some sort of a check. But however, he has committed in accounting principles. He has committed that he is going to pay this amount. So that is not a false. That is something true, right? Now, what is the scenario of paying material on site? In order to facilitate the contractor's cash flow, isn't it? Right? So now let us think about the other way around. If the contractor produces an invoice for a chiller plant, which is costing, let's say 50,000, are we going to end up in paying 80% of 50,000? Unfortunately, as per Oman conditions of contract, there is no other scenario which has been introduced in this one. Again, let us go back to this one. It says, such amounts, if any, as the engineer may consider proper, right? The word proper is there. but in no case exceeding 80% of their value in accordance with the contract. Now you have a barrier. Understand, this particular barrier is specifically mentioned within this particular term. Therefore, in either case, whether the material value exceeds the BOQ rate or not exceed the BOQ rate, as per this particular terminology, we can pay 80% of the material on site. Now let us go to the FIDIC 1987 version. Now, in FIDIC 1987 version, and actually before that, none of the conditions of contract define what is materials and what is plant. Okay. Now in FIDIC 1987 version, you can see the word plant with a capital P, which means machinery, very clearly stated. Apparatus and the like intended to form or forming part of the permanent works. Again it eliminates the fact the temporary works are not there. Okay, right. Now the plant means the machinery, apparatus and the like intended to form part or forming part of the permanent works. Here, if you go to the fourth line, actually the fifth line, I believe, invoice, yes, it says the first line, percentage of invoice value. Previously, in the Oman conditions of contract, they were talking about the value. It does not mention the word invoice. Here it mentions invoice value of the listed materials and plant in accordance with clause 60.1c, and at the bottom of this particular appendix to the form of tender, it says the payment on material on site sub clause 60.1c. So it mentions about that one. Then when we go to this particular monthly statement, it says the contractor shall submit to the engineer after the end of each month 6 copies, and at the bottom it says the percent, item number C, okay, the percentage of the invoice value of listed materials. Listed materials, okay, that means when you are entering into the contract, there should be a material list which can be agreed within the contractor and the employer in order to have this material on site payment. Otherwise, you are not going to pay for nails and all the other small things because it is not productive. Are you going to count the nails in order to pay to the contractor? No, it is not a practical scenario. Therefore, the practical scenario has been used based on experience. You know the 80-20 rules, right? 80-20 rule is a very common rule that is being used. Even though it is not exactly the same, you can simply say if there are 100 items within a BOQ, 20% of the items which are at the top, the value is contributing to 80% of the cost. This is in most of the cases it is same, and then 80% of the items, that is let's say 80 items, will be costing 20% of the cost. So there is no use of getting paid for that 20%. Rather than you can concentrate on the big fish, we call it the big fish, right? And it says the percentage of the invoice value as listed materials are all as stated in the appendix to center, and plant delivered by the contractor on the site for incorporation in the permanent works, but not incorporated in such works. See, it is very clearly mentioned incorporated in the permanent works, right? Contractor cannot ask for any payment for material on site for temporary works. FIDIC has been very careful in putting that one. It is understood because what is permanent works? That is what the contractor leaves behind. When he goes out of the site, he leaves behind that. But the temporary works is not like that. Maybe it has been consumed and it has been gone, and it doesn't give any sort of value to the end product. Right. Now let us understand the FIDIC 99 version, which looks at the material on site in a different perspective. Right. Now, for the first time, it defines what materials means. Materials means things of all kind. Then it specifically mentions other than plant. So you are very clear. If it is black, it is not white, other than plant. Intended to form or forming part of the permanent works, including supply only materials, if any, to be supplied by the contractor under the contract. Now, there are certain BOQs, contract BOQs, which stipulates the let's say, attic stock. I hope that you have heard about attic stock. Attic stock means the additional amount of material which is being required at the time of maintenance of the works. Because if you are talking about, let's say, a particular ceramic tile, from batch to batch, the color shade may change. Okay, so we have to be very careful, especially if this is happening in the hotels and majlis areas. They wanted to have an additional stock of the same material, so you cannot wait until the 11th hour in order to procure this material. Okay, otherwise, if it is lost, if it is going out of stock, you will not be able to replace at a later date. Therefore, this is what it means: supply only materials, if any, to be supplied by the contractor under the contract also will be paid. So if you thought that it is only the material which has to be gone for the permanent works, just eliminate that notion. That is a wrong notion. Okay, then let us go to let us understand completely what this plant and materials intended for the works means. If this subclause applies, interim payment certificate shall include, under subparagraph E of above clause, it is not required. It says an amount for plant and materials which have been sent to the site for incorporation in permanent works, and a reduction when the contract of value of such plant and materials is included as part of the permanent works. Okay. This is a very, very tricky area. Normally, the quantity surveyor who is working at site, either it is the contractor's quantity surveyor or the consultant quantity surveyor, they have a track of materials which has been in the site, in the stock at a given point of time. So as soon as the material is embedded within the final works, you have to write it off. That is how the material on site account goes. It's a very nice exercise. If you are a fresh quantity survey, I'm sure that definitely you will be enjoying this particular, maintaining this particular list, right? If the list referred to in subparagraphs B and C below are not included in the appendices center, this subclause shall not apply. See, there is an express term within FIDIC 99 version. So this is why, which is very important to use express terms. Now, later I will explain you within another case study. There is an express term in Oman conditions of contract that you need to have the maintenance certificate to release the retention. Okay, but in FIDIC, it is very clearly mentioned, it is not condition precedent to have the maintenance certificate in order to release the final retention. We will come back to that one. So see, this is a specific term FIDIC 99 has included. If the lists referred in subparagraph B1 and C1, actually subparagraph B is related to the material on site. The material subparagraph C refers to the materials, we call it en route to the site. En route to the site means it is coming to the site, but there is a confirmation that particular material has been acquired by the contractor in order to be used for the site. It is not something which is going on in the ship or the plane that you can say. It has to be specified for this particular project, right? If the lists referred in the subparagraphs B and C below are not included in the appendix to center, this subclause shall not apply. So there is a specific term. You cannot include something which is not in the list. Okay, but in FIDIC 1987 it says in the list you can pay, right? In the list you can pay, but if it is not in the list, you are not going to pay, it is not there. It is like that claims clause. You know that the claims clause, that there is a express term in the claims extension of time claim clause in 99 version, which we consider as condition precedent. If the contractor fails to notify to the engineer about an intent to extension of time claim within 28 days, he will lose his rights for a claim. So it is a condition precedent. So this is also specifically mentioned, right? But in the earlier version of FIDIC, it does not mention. If you don't give the notice on time, you will lose your right, right? So here it is very clearly mentioned. It is very good, very robust. So there is no room for ambiguity. The engineer shall determine and certify each addition in the following conditions. I am not going to talk about that. It is very simple things, but it is very important to say, kept satisfactory records, including the orders, receipts, costs, and use of plant and materials which are available for inspection. Okay, those things needs to be there. Submitted a statement of the cost acquiring and delivering to the plant and materials at site, supported by satisfactory evidence. I hope you remember last time I told you material should come to the site on time, right? If when you are at the foundation level, there is no requirement to have the finishing item which is required at the roof level to be purchased to the site. The engineer will not pay. It says engineer will have to pay if it is proper, and it is specifically mentioned. FIDIC 2017 version also addresses that one. I will explain that. And either the relevant plant of materials are those listed in the appendix or sender for payment when shipped. Okay, have been shipped to the country en route to the site in accordance with the contract. So then for the first time, it encompasses a term called bill of lading, right? A clean ship bill of lading. A bill of lading is saying that that particular material has been shipped to that particular destination, bill of lading, or other evidence of shipment which has been submitted to the engineer together with evidence. So again, it is talking about that. This is the material en route to the site. So FIDIC 1999 version is the first version which mentioned about materials off-site, right? Material off-site. Right, and then the relevant plant and materials, those listed in the appendix for payment when delivered to the site. Now this is for item number C, is pertaining to the material on site, have been delivered to and properly stored on the site. So if it is just dumped at the entrance of the site, it will not be paid. Okay, and if it is just put somewhere in a basement wherein it is susceptible to water clogging or something like that, if it is not protected against loss, damage, or deterioration and appear to be in accordance with the contract, it has to be safe, right, in good condition. The additional amount to be certified shall be equivalent to 80% of the engineer's determination of the cost and plant of materials. It does not say the invoice value, right? The additional amount to be certified shall be equivalent to 80% of the engineer's determination of the cost of the plant and materials, including delivery to site. Now, this gives the engineer the discretion to give fairness to both the parties to the contract. Either it is the contractor or the employer. But in FIDIC 1987 version, it is very bluntly saying it is 80% of the invoice value needs to be paid, right? It does not say that engineer's determination, right? It is very clearly mentioned in this one. And if you are talking about FIDIC 2017 version, this goes beyond that one. Actually, I did not include that one. It says the engineer has the engineer shall. It says the engineer's determination, the sum to be certified by engineer to be equivalent to 80% of the agreed or determined amount. Here it says 80% of the engineer's determination. Now this also gives little bit of an additional power to the engineer. Now here it is not saying that there is an agreement. In FIDIC 2017 version, it is more flexible. They can agree if there is a substantial reduction or addition of this material on site. Now you can see, now this is like the general common law principle. Now it goes into your mind, yes, this guy should be paid the right amount. This guy should be paid the amount that he deserves. This is why they included this terminology, right? Now let us go back to FIDIC. Okay, let us now go back to this example which I have told you. Should we pay 80% of the invoice, which is 112,000? If it is Oman condition of contract or FIDIC 1987 version, there is no restriction for you to limit that one. You can pay. Now think of this in a different way also, right? Now you know you're paying an advance payment to the contractor. Am I right? So is it in accordance with the work that he has done? No, we are going to give him an interest-free loan in order to facilitate procurement of his materials, engagement of his labor, uh, procurement of his plant, and all these things. Therefore, there is no harm in paying 80% of the invoice value, right? Because that, at least the contractor is financially sound to pay 80% of the value to this particular person. Okay, because some of the materials you can pay some amount at this juncture, and after another period of time you can have the payment terms for that one. So it will give some sort of a guarantee to the contractor. Okay, his risk is less, then he will be pricing much more comfortably, that I am at least getting 80% of the invoice value. Option 2, shall we pay 100 as the amount allocated in the BOQ? Is that now what I have to tell you is there is a provision in the BOQ. Once these materials has been embedded within the additional cost, the works which was completed, you have to reduce those value of the items. So it will automatically be corrected within the subsequent payment certificates. So therefore, you don't have to worry about that. It is the value in the BOQ is a separate item. Material on site is a separate item. Then option 3 says should we pay 122,000 including shipping charges. Yes, if it is material on site, normally the cost which has been involved in this particular item is 150,000 altogether. Therefore, 80% of 140,000 plus 80% of 10,000. Option 4 should be the most appropriate way to pay that. So I hope now you understood. This is the different scenarios applied to different conditions of contract when you're talking about that. And last, I want to tell you, engineer, if he determines this is an improper thing, right? And then again, the flip side scenario, if you are talking about that, if it is substantially low, the chiller plant's value is substantially low, engineer once again can come to some sort of an agreement with the contractor in order to facilitate his financial flow, right? That flexibility is there within 2017 version. Now let us go back to the next case study. The contract value is 1 million. By the end of the maintenance period, defects liability period, defects notification. Unfortunately, I have to use these 3 words because FIDIC from its subsequent publish of the red book has changed this particular period. Okay, if you see the 1977 version and Oman conditions of contract, they call it maintenance period. FIDIC 1987 version, they call it defects liability period. And then if you go to the 99 and onwards, FIDIC notification period, or DNP, they call it DNP. The engineer realizes that there are some unfinished works which has a value of 10,000. So in real scenario, let's say you are building a building, right? If the contract value is 1 million, suppose this is highly unlikely that there are no variations to the contract. So what is the amount that you need to hold towards the end of the maintenance period is 2.5% of the contract value. Okay. Now, in the FIDIC terminology, FIDIC 99 version onwards, you can say 2.5% of the accepted contract amount. In Oman conditions of contract, we call it contract value. Okay. So 2.5% of the contract value is equivalent to 250,000, I think, right? Yes, 100,000. Yes, not 250,000. 250,000 is 1/4. Actually, 2.5%, 25,000. Right now, let us think about this. Now, out of this 25,000, the engineer realizes that some of the unfinished works, which has a value of 10,000, has not been done by the contractor by the completion period of the maintenance. Okay, let's say the maintenance period has been completed on 31st of last year, 2019. Now, still the engineer finds there are a number of items which have not been completed by the contractor. So, engineer values that, engineer or engineer's representative values that as 10,000. So, what he or she should be doing in this regard? Before going into the analysis of this particular case study, we have to understand 3 things. Number 1, what is exactly defined by the maintenance period? Okay, and then what is exactly Right. Then what is exactly defined by the sorry, right. What is exactly meant by the maintenance period or defect liability period or defects notification period in accordance with different versions of FIDIC or Oman conditions of contract? And then what can be released upon completion of the item number 1? Okay. And then number 3, what are the other rights of the employer in this regard? That we will discuss once we come back, right? I think there is some, okay, fine, right, no problem. Now let us understand completely and fully what is the definition of period of maintenance. In Oman conditions of contract, they say period of maintenance shall mean period of 365 days. Cast in stone, they say 365 days. Calculated from the date of completion of the works certified by the engineer in accordance with clause 48. In the event of more than one certificate having been issued by the engineer under the said clause from the respective date so certified in relation to the period of maintenance, the expression the works shall be construed accordingly, provided that if any outstanding work is to be finished during the period of maintenance, the period of maintenance for this work shall commence from the date of their completion for this work, okay, as certified in writing by the engineer. Now, it is very clearly mentioned the majority of the works from the date of completion or the completion certificate has been issued whenever there is no sectional completion. The clock starts ticking from the date of completion certificate up to a year. But if there are any unfinished works, because the warranty certificates, the guarantees matter. Therefore, if there is any unfinished works, for the period of maintenance for that work, it says period of maintenance for this work shall commence from the date of their completion. Now you can see the 49.1, there is what I have extracted here. 49.1, here it says a period of maintenance for this work. The word work here is not capitalized, okay? So you have to be careful with this, whether it is permanent work or temporary work. I'll give you one example. I have a practical example of that one. There was a certain contractor in a particular project where there is some room that he has maintained within the works within that particular site, and it is neither temporary works nor permanent works. For some other purpose he has used that particular one, and by the end of the maintenance period he has not taken that things away from them. So this particular word applies here. It may not be the permanent works or temporary works also. By the end of the maintenance period, he has to take away whatever the things which is there. Right. Now, FIDIC 1987 version, it says, defects liability period shall mean the defects liability period named in the appendix to the tender. The FIDIC 1987 version gives the discretion to the parties to the contract to change that particular amount. It may not be 365 days, it can be changed, right? In the event of more than one certificate having been issued, the engineer, the respective dates are certified. And in relation to the defects liability period, the expression the works shall be construed accordingly. So there is not much of a change from FIDIC 1987 to FIDIC 1987. Now it comes to FIDIC 99 version. As you can see here, this is extracted from the defined terms. Now, defects notification period itself is a defined term in FIDIC 99 version. Means the period for notifying defects in the works or a section as stated in the appendix to the tender, calculated from the date on which the works or section, it is the same thing which is given, but in a different location. So you don't have to go through all these things, because you know that there is no much of a change here. Now, let us understand something very important. What you can see at the top is FIDIC 1977 version. I was 1 year old when this was issued. Okay. If somebody wants a copy of that one, I can provide you. Not an issue, because it's very rare to find. One of my learned colleagues found it for me. and luckily it is there with me. Now you can see the last line in the maintenance certificate in 1977. Sorry, I just slipped that one. See this one. Provided always that the issue of maintenance certificate shall not be a condition precedent to payment to the contractor for the second portion of the retention money in accordance with the conditions set out in part 2 this clause. So FIDIC 1977 version never said, okay, that issuance of the maintenance certificate is a hindrance for the release of the last retention money. But look at Oman conditions of contract. It says, it is not here, it says, I have to go a little up. Right. It says, you may not be able to see because I'm doing the screen sharing here, but I will just read it out for you. This is coming in clause 62, the last statement in Oman conditions of contract. It says the second half of retention money will be released after the date of issue of the maintenance certificate. So it is cast in stone. This is an escalation from the FIDIC terminology. Now, if you see in all the other FIDIC versions, this condition precedent version was there, because in practical terms, maintenance certificate says that the contractor is discharged from the works which is there. That particular sentence is there. That particular terminology is there. Maintenance certificate, or the in this here, what do you call, taking over certificate, right? In FIDIC 99 versions, they call it the taking over certificate, is the only document which approves the work, is the only document which says that this particular work is done and dusted. Okay, therefore it is very important. In practical terms, you cannot issue a taking over certificate or a maintenance certificate, right, if it is not completed. Then the contractor will be suffering, right? But however, FIDIC, that is why FIDIC says, because if you see the maintenance certificates which has been issued, there are certain conditional statements that you can use in the maintenance certificate. Okay, the maintenance certificate is issued to this portion of the works, but there are certain items like that you can issue like this. So it will not stop the contractor being paid the second portion of the retention. This is one of the things that you have to remember in your mind, right? Now let us go to the FIDIC 99 version about the taking over certificates, right? It says, except as stated in subclause 9.4, failure to pass tests on completion, the works shall be taken over by the employer when the works have been completed in accordance with the contract, including the matters described in subclause 8.2, time for completion, and except then there are certain items which says the engineer shall within 28 days after receiving the contractor's application, right, for the taking of his certificate, issue the taking over certificate to the contractor. Now here it says that normally a month has been given in order to issue the completed certificate. And then section where the completion in accordance with the contract, except for any minor outstanding work and defects which will not substantially. Now here I don't know whether you can read here, which will not substantially affect the use of the works or section for their intended purpose. Now this is what is revolving around FIDIC. All right. Now what do you mean by substantial completion? That means you can walk into a particular place, right? Now I can walk into this particular room, even though one part of the room is not painted. It is not compulsory for me to come here, but given the climatic conditions in this country, if without an AC, if I come into this particular room, it may not be substantially completion because I cannot live within that one. So there are certain compulsory things that you need to complete in order to have substantial. Now, the way that this has been worded is very clearly addressing the fact that minor matter should not stop the contractor being paid. So it is sort of a contractor friendly argument that comes into play, right? Now this is the glamour of FIDIC 99 version. Actually in 2017 version also there, you can see the timeline has been very clearly mentioned here, right? As you can see here, 10.1 issue of taking over certificate. After issue of taking over certificate, there is a defects notification period. Once again, I am telling you, this defect notification period can be 365 days or can be a different number of days based on either the appendix to the form of tender, or now they call it the contract data. In 2017 version onwards, they call it contract data, right? Going with the UK terminology. Now there is a remedying of defects time period which is given there. Even after the defects notification period, it is given there, and then within 21 days time, the performance security has to be released. So this timeline has been very clearly mentioned here, right? Now going back to our example, the contract value is of 1 million. By the end of the maintenance period or whatever it is, the engineer realizes that there are some unfinished works which has a value of this. What should he do? So what we can say is, he can issue, unless it Omani conditions of contract has not been altered, there is a problem, because the maintenance certificate can be, if it can be issued with a condition, not an issue, right? But if the engineer is reluctant to issue, because this 10,000 may not be substantial, may be substantial. This 10,000 may include something pertaining to the safety of a project. Okay, suppose that fire alarm is not working. Okay, the engineer cannot say the works have been completed. Okay, therefore the substantial amount, this 10,000, it is totally dependent upon the fact whether it is a minor nature, whether it is still can be considered as substantially maintained and completed. Then there is an option, you can issue the taking over certificate with a deduction of that particular amount, or else you can enter into some sort of a terminology with the contractor in this regard. Under Oman conditions of contract, in one place you can say, it is stated that definitely you have to have the maintenance certificate in order to release this retention, this 25,000. So whatever the case may be, you can release only 15,000 at this juncture. This is what I can tell. Now let us move back to the actually it is now 8:35. Yes, I think we are okay with the time. Ravi, can I have till 9:30? Is it okay? If everybody is okay, I don't know.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll try our best to finish as much as possible. I know everybody is tired, but anyway, there are 2 more case studies. I believe, I don't think it will take 1 hour to complete that one. I'll go as much as possible. Right. Right. Now, the third case study. This is also a very, very practical scenario, which most of the new QSs who are coming into the site, they encounter this sort of scenario. I will explain this to you completely what it is. The consultant quantity surveyor has realized that she has certified the following elements of works in the monthly certificate for the period of April 2020. Suppose that you are the consultant quantity surveyor who is doing the valuation of the monthly statement, which is the FIDIC terminology. We call it as monthly statement. Okay, we don't call it the payment application. We call it monthly statement, which is being submitted by the contractor. So that you are doing some evaluation, and by the end of the certification and after it has gone to the employer, you realize the actual quantity of excavation was 20,000, wherein you have certified 25,000 meter cube. Now there are possible scenarios which can happen in this regard. I will give you some examples. Now normally, you know, there are different factors. I'll explain you. If the basement area is very deep, okay, if the basement area is very deep, and if it is in a very confined space, there is no alternative for you to transport the soil in a non-steep slope. You understand this one, right? Now it is like this. If it is a very confined space, you have to have a steep slope. Am I right? Because your site area is not that with a big perimeter. But if you have something like a road area or something like that, then you can have a lesser angle. What do you call this ramp? Okay. Now, looking at the trucks, which is carrying the soil that has been excavated, right? You may not be able to fill the full truck. Okay, you may not be able to fill the full truck in order to transport the soil which is there within the bottom of that particular basement excavations. Suppose you have 5 basement levels or 3 basement levels. It is a deep area. Now, this is very similar to the fact that when you are constructing something in Jabal Akhtar area, I know most of you are knowing about that, especially the estimators know about this. In the Jabal Akhtar area, unless you don't have a batching plant near the site, okay, you cannot transport the fully loaded materials up to the site. You can transport only half of it, okay, because of the weight. It cannot go. You know, it is very difficult for a normal vehicle to also go like that. So this is one of the scenarios where this particular estimate can go out in the absence of a topographical survey. Because when you are doing frequent evaluations and frequent activities are going on, contractors may not be able to do a topographical survey until you come to a certain level, certain position. Because if you are doing it frequently, you will be disturbing the works. So at the time the quantity surveyor estimates this particular amount of soil, he or she didn't have that privilege to calculate that particular quantity through a topographical survey, right? So he or she might have taken the records of the trucks which has gone out from the site, and then something might have been over certified. Maybe the contractor also has given that sort of a over certification based on this. And there is another factor which is called the bulking factor. You know that a compressed amount of soil, right? The compressed amount of soil when it is excavated is definitely bulking, right? Therefore, it is if you do not take into account the correct bulking factor, the amount of soil which has been excavated may go wrong. So this sort of a mistake may definitely happen. But luckily, there is a provision in contracts, FIDIC-based contract, that you can subsequently change this one. You can subsequently correct this one unless the final payment certificate. That is number one, right? The second one says 5 columns which were cast on April 21st found to be defective on 15th May. So you can see after 3 weeks of time, once the quantity survey has finalized the quantity, you find that 5 columns which he or she has taken into account as completed works found to be defective. Now I'm going to enlighten you with the advisory level of the construction technology that you need to have. Okay, because the thing is, if you only have the knowledge, I know the people who are having the experience in this regard, please bear with me, because I'm going through different layers of quantity surveying practice here, different layers of experience here, different layers of expertise here, where what we have encountered, maybe a fresh QS will be getting some benefit out of this. So bear with me, maybe I'm talking something very common, right? But I wanted to emphasize this fact. There are 7 clear errors that can happen to a concrete structure. Let us take concrete column into account, right? I hope you all have heard about honeycomb and rock pockets, right? They appear on concrete surface where the voids are left due to the failure of the cement mortar to fill spaces. Now, what you can see on your right hand side is a real honeycomb, right? If you go to a column like that, this is why the name has stemmed from that honeycomb. It looks like honeycomb, right? So the honeycomb is a very common type of a mistake which is happening in columns. So normally when an engineer observes honeycombs or rock pockets, they call it rock pockets as well, they issue a non-conformity report or non-conformity notice, NCR, right? At the time of the quantity survey is certifying this one, that NCR has not been issued, quantity survey will be compelled to pay that one. But if he or she is an experienced quantity surveyor, now in these days, we expect the quantity surveyor to have an additional layer of expertise. That is why when you are becoming a chartered quantity surveyor, you should have the construction technology knowledge, application, as well as the advisory level as well. You should be able to explain someone how you are selecting a foundation. Okay, that knowledge needs to be there with a chartered quantity surveyor. He sometimes acts as an engineer's assistant as well. Okay, so it says honeycomb and rock pockets appear in concrete surfaces where the voids are left due to the failure of cement mortar to fill spaces. Causes of honeycomb rock pockets involve poor quality control during mixing, transporting, or laying of concrete. So I will not go much in detail. The other 6 areas of the concrete defects, right? One of them is defects due to poor formwork installation. Okay, now this particular understanding of you is helpful when you are doing evaluation. When you go to the site, when you see these errors, you can see, you can question the engineer. Why didn't you issue an NCR? Right? So in order to have that one, you should be able to know what the terminology. You cannot just go there and say that there is some defect, but I don't know what it is, something like that. So it is better to understand the underlying principles of these engineering lapses, okay, engineering failures, right? Defects due to poor formwork installation include misalignment, right? What do you mean by misalignment? Your formwork is not aligned well, okay? Your formwork, if it is intended to be vertical, there is a small slant in that. Because of that small slant, you can easily see, right? Even to the naked eye, you can see that the column is not properly cast. Then the movement, okay? Sometimes due to the lack of support, right? You might have seen that some of the columns, when you are doing a pouring under immense pressure, that they tend to move unless they are properly propped. That is called the movement. Then loss of support, right? Sometimes when you are casting a slab, right, one of the props may fail, one of the props may slip. Because of that, you will lose. There will be a bulking and the failure of forms that can lead to cracking and structural failure. So it is going to be a disaster if you are not going to do it properly. Then defects due to concrete dimensional errors, okay, occur either due to the poor centering of the structural member or due to deviation from specification, right? So poor centering, that means when you are not, suppose that you have a series of columns to be cast, and you go to the site to do the valuation, and you find 3 of the columns are not aligned in the proper way, that you know very well this particular column has to be reconstructed. It has to be broken, right, and then reconstructed. Because if you think that by cutting from one side and freeing from another side you can do it, no, because you need to have some sort of a structural knowledge in this regard as well. Because you know that a column cage should be able to take the compressive load, right? Compressive load and additional strength. Especially this happens in the beams as well, right? You know, the bottom reinforcement of a beam is meant for taking the tension, because concrete is not good in taking the tensional load. Okay, therefore, if the bottom reinforcement is not properly aligned, okay, you will be in a little bit of a trouble, right? So this sort of a knowledge, if you add value, will add value to your quantity surveying practice. The structural member can be used if it is acceptable for the internal purpose for the structure. Okay, defects due to concrete dimensional errors. The other one, the fourth one, is the finishing errors in concrete structures, right? Where sometimes you before the concrete gets set, okay, you apply a hose of water, right? So it does not, do not allow the concrete to gain its strength. So it will damage the hardening process of the concrete. Then the fifth one, the formation of shrinkage cracks in concrete structures. This is also a very common sort of a mistake, which is happening due to the evaporation of water from the concrete mixture. So if you are not properly putting water, proper curing is not there, right? The timing of the curing is absent. You will suffer with this sort of a shrinkage cracks. And then we call it another one called bug holes or surface voids. It is not a big issue. You might have seen certain spots on this one. This is due to the air bubbles which is coming out. It is not a big issue, but you can still observe that one. Then errors during reinforcement installation. This is also a very, very serious problem, because when you know that the concrete design is normally done up by BS 8110, that is for the structural concrete design, there is a specific cover that is being mentioned, right? The cover may be altering from 25 millimeter to 40 millimeter based on the exposure conditions. Okay, if it is closer to a sea or something like that, you have to have a more cover, right, in order to protect the reinforcement from rusting. So these sort of errors can happen in this situation. So coming back to this particular situation, actual quantity of excavation that you have over certified, if you narrate that one. Number two, and a non-compliant work has been certified by the quantity survey. What should you do, right? Now, actually this one is from the previous one which I have seen. Yes. Okay. Now then, going back to this one, now we have to understand what are the provisions contained within the contract in order to correct this scenario, right? Now, subsequent payment certificate, when you are doing a payment, this can be corrected by a subsequent payment certificate. That is very clearly mentioned within Oman conditions of contract as well. The contractors, what do you call, the ability to do the consultant quantity service ability to correct this particular correction, right? And then the fifth column which were cast, the 5 columns which were casted by this one, again this you have certified in a without knowing that there is a defect, right? Without knowing that there is a defect, you have certified that one. Then you have to also subsequently change this particular scenario, right? So this is the third case study which I discussed with you. Actually, the fourth case study, this evening I had a chat with one of my colleagues, and I discussed one of my one of my mentors also. This I did not prepare a slide, but I will explain this to you. The fourth case study, right? You can just hear me out. Now, it is a very nice scenario which was explained by discussed this evening. Now, assume that you have a nominated subcontractor, right? Assume that you have a nominated subcontractor. When you enter into an agreement with the nominated subcontractor, right, the employer discusses the terms and conditions related to the payment. Am I right? Right. Now, you know, in a normal payment certificate, you can see that when you make an advance payment of, let's say, 10%, what you are going to do is you recover the payment of the advance payment based on the actual value of work executed. Okay. Now, suppose if it is a 10 million project and you are going to assign a nominated subcontract for a 3 million. Okay. Now, if you know very well, if you are assigning a nominated subcontract for a 3 million, the balance 7 million. Now, I'm not considering the contingency here. Okay. Suppose in this particular contract, you have got only one nominated subcontract. Just assume for the time being. So this is a 10 million project. In this particular 10 million project, the value of work, including the preliminaries, is 7 million. Okay. The balance 3 million is related to the nominated subcontract. Assume that you pay the main contractor. Assume that you pay the main contractor 10% of the contract. Now, as per the Oman conditions of contract, the advance payment needs to be 10% of the contract value, excluding contingencies. This is the only stipulation which is given there. So no matter how much is the provisional sum, whether you are going to expend the provisional sum or not, you are going to pay that 10%. Okay. However, from the value of work done, you are taking it out. Now, in this scenario, that particular 3 million value worth of work which is being assigned for a particular nominated subcontractor, suppose the client enters into an agreement with this nominated subcontractor to pay him 30% in advance. To pay him 30% in advance, right? So what does that mean? Upon appointment of the nominated subcontractor, right, the main contractor is bound to pay him 90,000. Am I right? Okay. So sorry, 3 million 10% is 300,000, 900,000. Okay. Now this is a substantial amount. Okay. If the main contractor is getting paid for 10% of the contract value, and if the client or the employer enters into a nominated subcontract agreement with a higher percentage of advance payment, what does the contractor need to do? Okay. Now it is very clearly mentioned, right, in even in FIDIC 2017 version as well, right? As per the privity of the contract, you know what the privity of the contract is, that only the rights and obligations to the parties of the contract are affected by the terms and conditions of the contract. Okay. The employer does not have a contract with the nominated subcontractor, but the employer has certain privileges, or the nominated subcontractor has got some privileges. What is that? If the main contractor is not paying, the employer can directly pay and deduct from the main contractor's sums. That privilege has not been shared by the domestic subcontractors, that you all know, right? So in this scenario, the contractor takes the risk. The contractor takes the risk of paying that particular nominated subcontractor. But in FIDIC 2017 version, it is clearly mentioned that in this nominated subcontractor appointment, right, there are certain conditions which you can meet, right? One is the object to the nomination, right? But objection to the nomination does not mean that you can ask the employer, you can pressurize the employer to reduce the advance payment. But you can, of course, negotiate it with the employer regarding these particular terms. In a very exceptional type of a case as such, what we can do is we can take out the 3 million contract nominated subcontractor at the time of signing the contract. We will pay the advance payment related to the main contract works, right? And then, but you have to agree with the contract at this juncture, right? Then that particular advance payment is having a mechanism separately. But if it is a major chunk of a nominated subcontractor, if you are paying 30% upon appointment of the main nominated subcontractor, the client can pay, the employer can pay that 30% to the main contractor in view of paying the nominated subcontractor. So normally in the market, it is not happening, right? Normally in the market, that risk has to be taken by the main contractor, looking at the number of provisional sum items which has been contained within the contract. Now, this is very important from the cash flow point of view of the main contractor. Suppose that you are appointing, especially now, let's say there are certain subcontractors which nominated subcontractors who needed to be paid in advance, looking at the material that he wanted to acquire. Okay, so the main contractor, when he is pricing, he knows that this particular item is very important. This particular item, the nature and the extent of the work is being done by this type of contractors, subcontractors. So he can sort of escalate that one. He can judge this particular subcontractor, he might have dealt with the main contractor beforehand also. He can judge that this much of payment application can be advance payment can be done. Therefore, based on that particular scenario, that risk has to be priced by the main contractor at this juncture. Because FIDIC 99 2017 version also, when you are going to the nominated subcontract clause, it is very detailed. However, it does not necessarily mean that the main contractor can ask for an additional money or something like he shall bear the cost. This is how it has been stated. So this is how the scenario can happen. So these are the 4 case studies which I have prepared for you today. Actually, I could finish before 2 hours. It's good that we can have some. If somebody is willing to ask some questions, we can accommodate that one. Thank you very much. And Ravi, over to you. I'm willing to answer any questions.
Yes, we have not received any questions yet. Now the attendees can ask questions if you have.
Actually, Ravi, I thought that there could be some more what do you call case studies. You can sort of the case studies. It is like this. Now you don't have to be specific about what exactly the. Sometimes when somebody is putting a case study, there are what do you call confidentiality problems, Ravi?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So they can sort of like when you are doing an RICS APAC process as well, you can adapt different scenarios rather than now if you are talking about ceramic tile. Okay, if the actual case is ceramic tile, you can adapt it to marble or something like that, and then you do not present the exact case, but the core of the case you can present, right? So I'm willing to answer if there is any sort of a case study as such. If it is not confidential, I can actually answer the questions, not an issue.
Anybody? Right. While that. Now, Priyanka, about this last scenario about the NSC agreements.
Yes.
In case, if do you have any experience about how to deal, say the client has paid, so according to the contract, say 10% advance payment. In this case, 10 for the 10 million, 1 million advance payment have already issued to the contractor. Now, if the NSC has negotiated for 30%, can the main contractor request from the employer the balance 20%? Say, example, in this case, maybe another 600,000 additional amount to pay to the NSC.
Ravi, actually, there is no specific express term contained within the FIDIC conditions of contract related to that one, right? But however, this is why I told that at the time of signing the agreement, we can is Shantaya here in this forum? I spoke to him in this regard, actually.
Because I have some experiences where if the employer and the contractor agree to that, it can be done. Also, it seems reasonable in my opinion.
It seems reasonable. I think Mr. Shanta Vijayaratna is there. I had the same scenario. I had the same discussion. I'm sure that he can give some more value to this discussion. Mr. Vijayaratna.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
We can hear. See what will happen as same example. Priyanka got this 3 million case. When we pay this 30%, if your amount of advance payment is exceeding the amount you allowed in the tender, you can ask for the reimbursement, that money. So in OCC, what happened, one of the contractors, we had to pay almost like 5 million extra to NSC. So 500,000 we paid to the contractor, in a separate line as another additional advance payment to recover that money. Practically what will happen is, if it is exceeding, normally they have a case. Otherwise, for example, just imagine, we have given advance payment for the people, it is 2.5 million, already we have 3 million in the contract, you cannot ask for more advance payment. That's how it works.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like, Shandaya, I think you can enter into a supplementary agreement or something like that, ne?
We can do otherwise. Without that also, you can just do a request and then we can pay and then we can recover advance. There's no any hard and fast rule. As you said, there's nothing state in the documents. But practical thing, for example, if he wants to pay a big amount, because NSCs, we have negotiated and we have entered into a contract, and contractor should not suffer for that, isn't it?
Exactly. You're right.
So then as a client, we are compensating that.
Right? I think that is the more practical way. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santa.
Okay, no problem.
Yes, one more is there from, okay. Nadiska Sena, Nadiska has a question.
Okay. Yeah, Nadishka.
Nadiska, your microphone, you have to unmute the mic. Yeah. Yes, Nadiska.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Again, what happened is we have allocated 5% for NSCs, we can say around 25 million. Okay. Then, hello.
Yeah.
Then there are 25 million. Then India awarded NSCs that allocated 5% was exceeded.
Ravi, I cannot hear him properly.
Nadiska, we are getting some disturbance. Can you explain again?
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
That in we have allocated 5% of around 25 million. Then India awarding the contract one by one. Then the limit has been exceeded. So around 28 million. So it's exceeded by around 3 million. So
it is again getting disturbed.
Nadishka, can you type the question that you wanted to ask, Nadishka? Is it difficult? Because your voice is not that audible. That is why.
then I type the question.
Yeah.
Now I can hear you. Can you tell again?
All right. Okay. Then what happened was that we have allocated time for sum of 20. We can say 25 million in one project.
Okay.
Awarding the NSCs one by one, the limit has been exceeded. We can say another by 3 million. That's been exceeded.
Okay.
Then contractors requested because we have given the advance payment to the main contractor based to 25 million.
Okay.
Exceeding the prime consumption, they have to, as you said, that 10% normally to the NSCs also. So we have requested additional, as Shanta said, additional payment for the exceeded amount.
Okay.
Then what we have done was, as you said, that we have paid that advance payment, additional one, to the work done, actual work done. So just I want to do the same procedure you have said right now. Then that taking back the advance payment, but the additional advance payment, separate scenario.
Actually, as Mr. Vijayaratna Shantajira explained, now it comes to Nadishka. Now, if you are talking about the newest version of FIDIT, there is something called unforeseeable, right? There is a defined term called unforeseeable that cannot be foreseen by a experienced contractor, right? Now, in this scenario, as Mr. Vijayaratna has rightly stated, if the contractor had the opportunity to know that we are paying an additional advance payment, I mean, if we had the opportunity to know that we are paying because what I understood from what you said, that we are paying more advance payment than expected. That's what you are saying, right?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yes, because the thing is, it's like this. Again, when we are applying the advance payment scenario, excluding the contingency sum Nadishka, that means provisional sum amount is also included with that one, right?
Yes.
So that portion pertaining to the provisional sum amount, what the contractor has judged was, he will be receiving 10% of that provisional sum amount only, right? So if it is something addition, I believe what Mr. Shanta Vijayaratna has explained is correct. Something additional we can pay. We have to pay. I think it is the more pragmatic and more fair approach.
Yeah.
It is by separate separate that agreement, or through the actual work done we can pay. Is it?
Separately you can pay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a question from Mr. Amila Bandar. Example, under the PS item, design cost issued as a variation to the contractor, that design is carried out by the contractor's nominated designer. However, main contractor came with argument saying he does not have any design liability and that should bear with the design. Okay, now this is a very nice item. Provisional sum item, design cost issued as a variation to the contractor. Now this is also Amila, are you there? Okay, I think he is listening. Right. Let me explain this. Under provisional sum item, design cost issued as a variation to the contractor. That design has been carried out by the contractor's nominated designer. However, main contractor came with the argument saying he doesn't have any design liability. Oh yes, this is now. This is once again coming back to the scenario. There are certain portions that the contractor can design. That is when we are selecting the contractor, right? When we are selecting the contractor, we need to see what specialty he does have. Now, for example, this is case by case. I'll give you an example. When you are doing a car park, let's say something very common, like a car park cover shade. Okay, you know, in the specification it says the contractor has to design that portion of this. You know, for that sort of a design, the contractor doesn't need to have a big know-how. But the problem here is, once we assign that, we issue the variation, right? What was the time that contractor came up and saying he doesn't have a design liability? Because if I break this question into two, it says contractor has got a nominated designer and he has done the design, and at the end of the day, the contractor says he cannot take the design liability, which is not acceptable, because it is detrimental to the good faith and fair dealing principle.
Yeah, Priyanka, if I add about this nominated subcontractors clause in Oman conditions, now 59.3,
Yes.
there is a provision to design requirements to be expressly stated.
Exactly.
Under the terms.
Yes, correct. I agree.
It should be operated, no?
Yes, I think you are right. Yes, I missed that point. Thank you, Ravi. Yes, that is important. I think I have given the answer to that one.
Microphone, Amila's microphone, we can on. Ishar, can you see that? Yeah, Amila, you can unmute the mic and speak now. Amila, you can speak, but your microphone is, you have to unmute the microphone. It is microphone is at left side down. You can see, I log in into the computer. Right. Any other questions? We'll Amila, if you have any further things to add, you can send us an email, or you can log into the discussion forum. I have opened one discussion forum under this subject in the website. You can put your thoughts there also. Okay, one more new message.
Hope people are tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, because today is a working day. That may be one of the reasons. Anyway, I'm willing to take any questions and answers, Ravi, if it comes. So even after that,
Yeah.
we will do one question. And as you have rightly stated, if you have a forum, we can have a separate session, not an issue.
Any other questions? So can we wrap up the session? Yeah. So we will now wrap up the session. Thank you very much, Priyanka. Again, your access to us, and your valuable thoughts and your experience is very much appreciated, and it was very valuable today. And I know you are also a busy person with Sri Lankan school and also your works, but spending this time for us, it is very much appreciated, and thank you very much again. All the participants, thank you very much for attending. We'll be informed through SLQS email about the next CPD. Most probably next week we can arrange one CPD is under discussion. And also please actively participate to the SLQS forum. We have shown here. If you log into the SLQS website, you can see the CPD, okay, under the SLQS forum. So can you, yeah, this is events. Once you go to the website, you can see there are one tab, it's events, then the first tab one, that is SLQS forum. So login, you can go to there, then you can start. If you need a new topic, you can start. Also, for this topic, we have already started the topic. So you can log into that and you can add your ideas. So thank you very much. So we'll meet in next time in next CPD. Thank you very much, Priyanka, and
Okay.
all attendees.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks all. Thanks all for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.